What I want to do is start with the Homo sapiens. And the Homo sapiens, when, just starting out, food was the big thing, okay? He who had food had a prospering, society, and then scarcity shifted as a result of the agriculture essentially into scarcity of land. And then a lot of the wars were about land. Second World War was Hitler's crazy idea that there's not enough land for the... And at some point, we invented the dollar. Not too long ago, we invented this whole thing of capital. And as a result of that, so many amazing things happened. We invented the steam engine, and we invented the iPhone, and we did all those great things. And potentially, it's now shifting again. And the scarce resource right now is essentially no longer capital. It is attention. And if the attention of the human being is the scarce resource, I wonder if looking at the technology from the lens of capital is the right way, or is there another lens that would find more and deeper true callings for the use of a technology? And this will obviously bounce against the idea that you can improve your technology all you can, but eventually it will be about your values and who you are as a human being. So I would like to go deeper into that idea of can technology enforce values, and can we truly find a higher goal rather than capital as the true calling of Web 3.0. I think Web 1 was essentially single production, mass consumption. Web 2 was a little bit of mass production and mass consumption. Web 3 ideally would be mass production and more pinpointed consumption, and acknowledging the fact that scarcity is now the big thing. So with that in mind, I would like to allow my panelists to introduce themselves very quickly, and then I will ask them some questions. Please.
Yeah, I'm Martin Koppelman. Related to that, well, my day job is I'm founder of Gnosis. We are building prediction markets, and maybe kind of can connect to the attention economy, because it's really about in prediction markets, it's about aggregating all the signals, so all the noise or all the signals into one number, which maybe then gets attention it deserves. But maybe just another addition, and in introducing myself, another project I'm working on is called Circles. It's about the idea of creating a universal basic income with help of a new currency, or with help of blockchain, and that of course ties to the idea that potentially capital is no longer a scarce resource, or at least a less scarce resource, and that we could think about those things like having a universal basic income, and potentially blockchain can help to deploy that.
Cool, thank you.
I'm Bonnie with 500 Startups. We are a global seed stage investor. So as a very traditional VC with typical 10-year timeframes, I think one way we looked at the Web3, it's a little bit broader and higher level than potentially just blockchain. So allow me for 1 minute, dragging us away from blockchain for a second, is that when we look at a 10-year horizon, what we're essentially seeing Web3 is the next generation of infrastructure. of the internet and what would it look like. And when we look at it, it's really, three elements of it. Number one is we're going to interact with the internet very differently than we do today, because so far we've seen all the last 20 years, it's all a two-dimensional interaction. So this is where things like VR, AR is going to come in. Number two is going to be, we looked at the infrastructure layer. So far, Web 1 is very much single directional consumption of information. Web 2 is more of a bi-directional. And what we see Web 3 is beyond just communication exchange. We should be able to innately have the ability to exchange any item of value to us. Currently, today, we cannot do that on the internet. We can talk to each other, we can communicate without an intermediate, but we cannot exchange anything we value without still an intermediate there. So this is where we believe the blockchain is going to play a major role in that segment of the internet evolution. And then thirdly, is also we're starting to actually see more and more interaction between blockchain as well as the innate embedding of intelligence, right? So AI becoming more of a commodity, many of the algorithms, and how can it be embedded in our next layer of internet infrastructure, such that many of the things we looked at, we no longer need a specific third party to provide that intelligence, but actually it will be innately embedded in the infrastructure itself. So this is kind of where, as an investor, we looked at the Web3.
Okay. I'm Roderik van der Graf. I'm the founder of Lemniscap, which is an investment firm focused exclusively on blockchain and crypto assets. In terms of Web3, so I think us here from this industry, we're probably looking at it from the lens of what we understand under blockchain to be Web3. But before all this came about, there was already talk about Web3 that had other things in mind, semantic web and embedded artificial intelligence and all that. So I think we need to take a broad view of Web3 and not only focus on, like the things, the projects that are coming up that are, Web3 stacks on blockchain and that's it, right? So it's quite a lot broader than that. And I think that ties up with what Donnie just said. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why Roderik is my investor, because he gets this.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Kordek, co-founder and president of Lisk. I'm in blockchain space since quite a bit of time, and I've seen in many communities that it's very difficult to build your own blockchain. And that's why I co-founded Lisk with my partner Oliver Beddoes to make that simpler. So we are building developer tools to enable JavaScript developers from all over the world to come up with their own blockchain concepts. We want to make it as easy as possible so that we can have much more experiments, more proof of concepts happening to really see what is truly the stack of the Web 3.0 and to truly see in what kind of use cases people can exchange real value without an intermediary. With Lisk, we're taking a bit of a different route. We're not only there for developers, we're also there for just average users to gain access into the ecosystem. By having, for example, an academy where people can read about blockchain tech and educate themselves. And we are big about user experience because we feel like the whole space is lacking that as well. But basically what we are coming up with is developer tools for the Web 3.0 stack, specifically blockchain technology.
Cool, very interesting. So when you think about the Web 3 to carry out on Frederick's point, I would like to essentially think beyond the basic stuff. So I have my data with me, I have my money with me, and I choose my route in the internet, and potentially I make value transactions. So we think this is a better web for many reasons, many obvious reasons. It's, there's no single point of failure, there is no essentially immutability and centralization of knowledge. And what I would like to sort of talk about are the hurdles in getting. Essentially, I would like your perspective on how far are we from this utopian future, and what do we still need to overcome in your mind in order to get there?
Yeah, I can start. So I think Well, I do think the first use case for Web3, at least the blockchain perspective, I know there's the other one, is interoperability between different projects that want to share some same liquidity or marketplace or stuff like that. So I would argue for now most users don't care about decentralization, and it's more projects or companies that care for so if I offer, let's say, a marketplace and I want others to build on top of it, like build stuff around it, use the API, connect to it, then that is quite hard if I'm a normal startup, because to convince another startup to build on top of my stuff, that's quite a risk for them because they are completely dependent on me, and so that's what we saw in the last 10 years in Silicon Valley. There are a few winner-takes-it-all platforms that kind of get to that size where then they are big enough that others care and build on top, and they are monopolies. Well, great, or maybe not great. And here, Web3 offers an alternative. So I can offer something, and even if people like don't believe much in or don't trust that much in the team, or they can still at some point be confident enough that they can build on top of that and are completely independent. So I do think that is, or that is at least my perspective, that we are unfortunately not there yet, that we can really, or the benefit for the end user will come later, I would argue. So the benefit for the end user would be that there are platforms where immediately 5, 6, 7 players build stuff on top or around it, and therefore then create a richer ecosystem, and eventually that richer ecosystem will outcompete the centralized offering. But we are slowly getting there. So slowly those things are starting to happen. But
I think there's definitely, we have that ideology spot where we are right now. There are really 3 obstacles we see, right? Number 1 is scalability. And if you've ever observed the space last year, you know that there's been so many projects already right now. So very encouraged to see some of the developments, and we're slowly starting to see the space of scalability morphing into, it's almost like the world of GPUs, ASICs, and CPUs. There's going to be some base chains that are going to be almost like ASICs. They're fast, but they're very specific usage. They cannot cover a lot of use cases. They're the more general base chains. So that's base scalability, and then plus base chains, we've also seen a lot of layer 2 solutions. Particularly, I think recently I've been quite excited and want to really watch is the space of layer 2 for Zcash. That, because to me, it's the second obstacle behind scalability is privacy. A lot of the times what you see is, yes, we talked about from the normal world saying, hey, crypto is so anonymous, but it's actually not anonymous at all. And that's one of the biggest issues of, when people talk about adoption or when people talk about how do we monetize data, is until the day we can actually process that data privately on the chain, it's going to be very difficult for that ideology to really be reality. And
can I please challenge this argument?
Of course.
What if it's no big deal that the information leaks? What if we can build a world, in Sweden they're already exposing their tax sort of consideration, it's all public, you can go and look how much money your friend made, and all of a sudden, in the US, if my tax papers got leaked, I'm in a serious trouble. In Sweden, because it's public, it's already like no big of a deal. So I wonder if we can protect people more than protect information.
And my answer to that would be that leads exactly to my third obstacle of interoperability, because I don't see, in reality, the next 20 years, corporations and companies disappearing. Yes, we do see the behavior from the under 25 or under 30 millennials being a lot more lax about, the amount of data they're willing to share, the amount of privacy they're willing to expose. But from a business perspective, I absolutely do not see that happening. And hence, what we're looking at, the current timeframe development, right? From last year, everybody is building their completely closed blockchain. I wouldn't even call that blockchain. It's basically a very expensive distributed ledger systems. But today, we're starting to see, for example, some of our accelerator batch companies who are building public chains, but now getting opportunity and exposure to work with corporations like GM, Dish Network, et cetera, to understand a little bit more about, hey, there is now slowly willingness in the corporate side to even touch the permissionless chains and even to see, what's being offered. So from an investor perspective, I see that as progress in the last 18 months. But then what would happen is in the intermediate term, there's going to be many chains that exist, whether they're consortium, permissionless, permission, and hence interoperable part of it is going to be another challenge, right? To figure out, hey, if everybody's starting doing, little things here and there, how is this going to get glued together? It's almost like in the old days of, when every company's looking at, we must have an intranet strategy. How's the intranet going to tie it into the internet, and what information is allowed to flow through, what's going to be stopped? So I think that's kind of where we see we are at this moment in time. There's still obviously a lot of work, but we are super bullish in the space because of the progress we see, just from last year to now.
Okay, let me approach it from a slightly different angle. So I think you gave a very good overview of kind of technical challenges that need to be overcome to get to eventually Web3. There are some other ones as well. So at this point, we know of a lot of projects being built in you can have decentralized compute, decentralized storage, decentralized this and that. It's all cool, and we believe in it because we're in this space. For it to actually happen, the end users will need to see a benefit to it, because the pure ideology of being decentralized by itself is not enough. And we have seen in the quite recent past things related to data and privacy. Actually, most people don't really care, right? So it is really about trying to crystallize what's in it for them, and in a way that comes down to the interchange between the private data, which is now being monetized centrally by a few big parties, and whether that can be kind of redistributed to the actual contributors to those networks, either directly or via crypto networks, incentives, things like that. And until that happens, it's very hard to see that it can be pushed just from the project point of view, right? So there is an effort that needs to be made in that direction.
Yeah, I see it similar. Like, in order to really adopt the next level of the web, we really need an increase in we really need an advantage for the user. When we're looking at the Web 1.0, it just showed information, right? Web 2.0 allowed people to connect to each other. What will Web 3.0 allow? Will it really allow to own data? Will it allow to own value on some blockchain, or what's the benefit for the user? And coming from a perspective of a developer and building a developer platform, of course, there are many obstacles in terms of the whole development infrastructure, which is just not ready. I mean, we at Lisk, we're building since 2.5 years our tools, and we're just launching this year our alpha version. And we're seeing similar stuff in the other ecosystems where the developer tools are just very basic, very simple, and they don't allow developers to securely develop blockchain technology. So there obviously still needs to be a lot done. But if we're taking it from the user perspective, then what's in it for the user? They obviously don't care so much about privacy. Does it really matter? They don't care about decentralization. People are giving all kinds of information publicly available to the world. So they need to have a clear benefit. And what could that be? For example, if you say now the tickets for this conference, is it maybe an access token on the blockchain, which you could sell further? That might be a real benefit for the user, and it is built on a Web 3.0 stack. But is it the real Web 3.0, or are we talking about more interoperability stuff where then this clicks in with another? So in terms of a hurdle, I think there's still a lot to be done, because at the end we will not have the Web 3.0 until many pieces are coming together. And I think we will look back and think how did that happen? Because we are in it, we are developing it, we're working on it, and we see many things are progressing well, but it's not nowhere near at that point. So many hurdles, technology-wise, infrastructure-wise, but mainly also just benefit for the user. What's in it for the user?
Cool. So I think there's almost a consensus within the panel that Web 3.0, the real deal, is still far. And this is unfortunate, but it's also a reality to be reckoned. And I think we should then ask, do we see a Web 2.5? And sort of, is there clear benefits for a platform that's been monopolistically bullying everybody until now, and now that the sign is on, can they gracefully emerge some of these, ideas that are, as I'm saying, on the wall, so it's no longer a white elephant that nobody talks about, but everybody are talking about it. So embracing that and gaining the user's trust is something that potentially can help. And we are definitely hearing about some platforms that are already making serious strides towards that goal. So what's your view on Web 2.5? The SDKs and APIs that will allow existing web businesses to have a layer of payment and, user to user on top. And I wonder if that's all there is to blockchain, because I personally think no. I personally am a huge believer in the true calling of Web 3.0 to make it very simple. I think for as long as we have cheap labor cleaning, toilets, there is no actual incentive to invent an automated toilet cleaner, okay? A robot that cleans toilet, because it doesn't pay back. But, this lens doesn't give us the best perspective on should we do stuff. So essentially, it's a little bit harder to really hold what's in it for the user. But maybe it's the freedom of, living your life the way you think it should be, and having more freedom of thought. Maybe eventually that will be the killer app of that. But let's go back to Web 2.5 and essentially talk about the earlier kind of use cases we will see for the ability to perform microtransactions. So.
Yeah, I would say, at least in some spaces or in some areas, we are not that far away. So probably, in my view, and I certainly might be biased, the first case where we really see some of the promises of Web3 is currently, on Ethereum in the decentralized finance space, because there are, right now, there are probably between 15 and 25 teams building on the same platform, similar but different products like decentralized exchanges, lending protocols, option protocols, all that stuff. And the effect I described earlier, that people build on top of each other's things without building on an early startups platform, that is what we see right now on Ethereum. Because if you see that smart contract and you can just verify it, you don't care who wrote it, you just use it, and we see transactions happening between all the different exchanges doing arbitrage. So of course that's far away from the whole idea of Web3 and so on. But at least for financial transactions on the same blockchain, it kind of starting to work.
This is why sometimes we do see that corporates are the necessary evils. Because if you think of a lot of that ideological Web3 is, hey, wouldn't it be nice if you can sell your personal data? True, but if you ask people, is it truly a huge pain right now? They probably don't know, because they're so used to Facebook. Whereas when you go into the corporate world, you look at digital transformation, even the earlier wave, it's always starting with what pain points they have. They have a lot of pain in terms of cost savings, obviously, is the easiest one to look at. So if you take a corporate, very simple use cases, right? At least get the teams to test out how their change is going to work in a real scenario. For example, we talk about Web3 as exchange of any assets of value. So it doesn't need to be necessarily be just data as we think of our time use on this web, right? The asset of value could be in a cable provider. They're actually having a huge pain point about locating assets. They have no idea where gazillions of pieces of many of their tower-related equipment is. So the project they want to run is figure out, can a very specific high-speed baseline layer 1 chain help them do this in a very painless way, meaning they don't have to dig back into that whole entangled web of systems right now, but they can pull it aside and say, can we build a permission chain, even amongst all their own business units across the whole US, 48 states, to figure out how to track these real time. This is something of value to them. Another example would be with a car manufacturer. They're looking at automation big time. So one of the things they really want to see if blockchain can solve is in the future, energy is going to be something of value to them. So they're actually thinking of the idea of when an electric car purchases energy from the grid or from wherever your powering station is, can the car actually resell that unused energy to another car? And how does that micropayment between cars work? And to me, that actually gives our projects a lot more boundary in terms of how to work it and how to make it run and see what happens. Versus a lot of the times, I think when you come to like new use cases or new needs, it often, in the history of time, you look at it as it comes after all the cost savings are done. Then people have time and ability to look at, hey, now that we have this gadget, what else can we use it for? So that's at least, kind of what we see in terms of investable areas and projects.
Yeah. So I think one immediate thing that can happen pretty quickly, it's already being worked on, is finally, bring the Internet of money to the Internet, right? Actually, the original hypertext transfer protocol had provisions to have money embedded, but it didn't happen because it was too hard to do at the time. But now the means to do that are, we pretty much know what they are. So, that is already a good step to use blockchain and go a certain way towards Web3 in a hybrid model. So it can be used by any companies, even if there is no decentralization going on. Now, a little bit further down the line, talking about 2.5, you can see that as a hybrid between, like Web 3.0 is everything is, the ideal case that maybe you like. But in reality, I mean, not everything actually needs to be that way, right? So you will have a kind of hybrid between, what we know now and decentralized challengers to incumbents. And in some cases they will win, in some cases they will not win. But, with the associated redistribution of value. Long period of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for me, Web 3.0 is just a buzzword. I think when we're looking at the current internet, we see application or websites still out of the Web 1.0 era. We see Web 2.0 applications, web applications. I think you're in a phase as soon as every startup is majority building in terms of this, let's say, with this background. Right now, every new startup is somehow involved with social media, somehow involved with like connecting people online, right? And I think we will be in Web 3.0 once every new startup which is popping up is making use of this Web 3.0 tech stack. I think there's no real middle way. Of course, there are areas which are already built on that stack, but I think we cannot really talk about Web 2.5 because either something is Web 3.0 or it's Web 2.0.
Yeah, I agree, but I think there's confusion between whether something is truly decentralized.
Yeah, that was my next point. So I would just, because of time reasons, just ask one question. Can we ever say that we will be in Web 3.0 if the internet itself, if the infrastructure is still centralized? I mean, in Germany, we have one node which runs like 80–90% of the traffic of the internet, which is in Germany. So I think we will have to also reinvent the wheel there and make a decentralized internet again before we can really talk about a Web 3.0.
Okay, interesting opinion. That's the first time I hear that. I think I would like to share personally my perspective. I think that my perspective, as you can imagine, doesn't talk about features, but it goes a little bit, I try to go a little bit deeper with what went wrong in the information era. I mean, Facebook was truly out there to connect people. All well-intended people, over time, becoming an enslaving machine of, like, triangulates you from every possible, so they can tailor the perfected. How did it happen to them or to all the other, you know, well-intended people that essentially, and can Web3 truly provide an answer to that? And I believe that somewhere in the process of free information, we lost the idea of proof of work. You know, Bitcoin has this thing that you cannot just run your mouse like crazy. You need to perform a certain action before you can talk, and then you think. Or maybe when you put your money where your mouth is, the dynamics of the discussion are elevating rather than disintegrating. Can we look at this process of elevating versus disintegration and try to learn what is the rules that would emerge certain behavior that is novel and that is transcending and that is value creating in orders of magnitude more than a top-down kind of. So there is a vision where it will create much more wealth for the participants in these networks, and it will allow a healthier, you know, life-work balance and all this good stuff. But in order for it all to happen, we must separate what is and what should, okay? So many things are the way they are, and we accept it as a necessity, which are not really a necessity, and they shouldn't be like that. So how can we tell those things apart? How can we actually learn about something that we've been thinking is a necessary part of this social contract, and essentially we can elevate and say, no, it's not an essential part. And I think we've done that throughout history multiple times, but I wonder what would be the catalyst. I think wealth or value creation is very different than profit making, and if you can adopt this sort of view, then maybe you start to see how you can measure value different than measure profits, and if you can do that, potentially you can treat trust as a natural resource, as something that you can really, you know, with the right tool set in mind, you can pump it off the ground, and it's very lucrative. It's something that if we are able to measure what I'm doing now with you, and no money is being exchanged, but potentially I like you more now, and maybe we'll do business in the future, so something really real happened. But no, the money business cannot sort of document that. So there's so much better things we can do once those infrastructures are in place. I think that putting those infrastructures in place is a long and complicated process. You need to decentralize your brain, and the way you've been thinking about solving problems in a centralized world is very different. But just to summarize all that, I think systems that achieve coherence in a top-down way will always have a trust, suspicion. Systems that achieve cohesion in a, you know, start very distributed, and they look further and further for their mutual themes, and eventually the mutual theme is really great, and we all, these kind of coherence mechanisms, by definition, contains more trust.
And since we're on such a philosophical concept now, I think one of the crazy questions you ask yourself sometimes is, what's the point of Web3? or Web 4 or Web 5 if it's not making our lives as human beings better, right? And hence, to the bottom line of it is, can Web 3 actually alleviate and elevate us such that every single human being born in the future can have all necessities provided for? Hence, universal basic income potentially can be one of the solutions, such that every single one of us is only sitting here, listening to the four of us talking just because you want to. Because it should be your time should no longer have any ties to providing the necessities that you need to survive. And I think to me, at least from a point of like philosophical ideas, is no technological improvement is worthwhile unless it's actually that's where we're getting to, such that we all have more time. Because at the end of the day, I think the 24 hours of time is the most valuable asset we all have. And I'm also staring like overtime.
Yeah, overtime. It's like, if we keep on talking
so we're all
another
short
minute,
on time.
the stage will explode. So we have to wrap. Thank you very much for listening to us. And you are welcome to ask us any questions, of course, outside.